Optimize your application startup time with Hermes. Achieve a better performance of your apps with Hermes. Issue you are loading a lot of Android packages during the startup time, which is unnecessary. Also, you are using an engine that is not optimized for mobile. User expects application to be responsive and load fast. Application that fail to meet this requirement can end up receiving bad ratings in the App Store or Play Store. In the most extreme situation, they can even get abandoned in favor of their competition. There is no single definition of the startup time. It's because there are many different stages of the loading phase that can affect how fast or slow the app feels. For example, in the Lighthouse report, there are 8 performance metrics used to profile your web application. One of them is time to interactive, which measures the time until the application is ready for the first interaction. There are quite a few things that happen from the moment you press the application icon from the drawer for the first time. And then the loading process starts with native initialization, which loads the JavaScript VM and initializes all the native modules. In the above diagram, it then continues to read the JavaScript from the disk and load into the memory, parses and starts executing. To in the above diagram, the details of the operation were discussed earlier in the section about choosing the right libraries for your application. In the next step, React Native starts loading React components and sends the final set of instructions to the UI manager. 3 in the above diagram, finally the UI manager processes the information received from JavaScript and start executing the native instruction that will result in the final native interface. As you can see in the diagram below, there are two groups of operation that influence the overall startup time of your application. The first one involves the first operation and describes the time needed for React Native to bootstrap. The other one includes the remaining operations and is associated with the business logic that you have created for your application. The length of this group is highly dependent on the number of components and the overall complexity of your application. This section focuses on the first group, the improvements related to your configuration and not the business logic itself. If you have not measured the overall startup time of your application or have not played around with things such as Hermes yet, keep on reading. Longer startup and times and slow UX can be one of the reasons your app gets a bad rating and ends up being abandoned. Creating applications that are fun to play with is extremely important, especially considering how saturated the mobile market already is. Now all mobile apps have to be not only intuitive, but they also have to be pleasant to interact with. There is a common misconception that React Native application comes with a performance trade-off compared to their native counterpart. The truth is that with enough attention and configuration tweaks, they can load just as fast and without any considerable difference. Turn on Hermes to benefit from a better performance. While a React Native application takes care of native interfaces, it still requires JavaScript logic to be running at runtime. To do so, it spins off its own JavaScript virtual machine. Until recently, it uses JavaScript code. This engine is part of WebKit, which powers the Safari browser and by default is only available on iOS. For a long time, it made sense for React Native to use GSC for running JavaScript on Android as well. It's because using the V8 engine that ships with Chrome would potentially increase the differences between Android and iOS and make sharing the code between platforms way more difficult. JavaScript engines need to perform various complicated operations. They constantly ship new heuristics to improve the overall performance, including the time needed to load the code and then execute it. To do so, they benchmark common JavaScript operation and challenge the CPU and memory needed to complete this process. Most of the work of developers handling the JavaScript engine is best tested against the most popular websites such as Facebook or Twitter. It is no surprise that React Native uses JavaScript in a different way. For example, the JavaScript engine made for the web doesn't have to worry much about the startup time. The browser will most likely already be running at the time of loading page. Because of that, the engine can shift its attention to the overall CPU and memory consumption, as web application can perform a lot of complex operation and computation, including 3D graphics. As you could see on the performance diagram presented in the previous section, the JavaScript virtual machine consumes a big chunk of the app's total loading time. Unfortunately, there is little you can do about it unless you build your own engine. That's what the Meta team ended up doing. Meet Hermes, a JavaScript engine made specifically with React Native in mind. It is optimized for mobile and focuses on relatively CPU insensitive metrics such as application size and memory consumption. Chances are you are already using it. As of version 70, React Native has been shipping with Hermes turned on by default, which marks an important milestone in the engine stability. It comes a long way from the bare bones Android only engine open sourced in 2019. The careful curated set of supported JS features due to size constraint through finding low size footprint ways of adding more ECMAScript spec features like proxies and internationalization until making it available for macOS and iOS. Today, Hermes is still small enough, almost 2 MB, to provide significant improvements to AppStity and gives us a set of features rich enough to be used in most of the apps out there. Before we go into details of enabling Hermes in existing React Native application, let's take a look at some of its key architectural decisions. Byte time code pre-compilation. Typically, the traditional JavaScript VM works by passing the JavaScript source code during the runtime and then producing the bytecode. As a result, the execution of the code is delayed until the parsing completes. It is not the same with Hermes. To reduce the time needed for the engine to execute the business logic, it generates the bytecode during the build time. It can spend more time optimizing the bundle using various techniques to make it smaller and more efficient. For example, the generated bytecode is designed in a way so that it can be mapped in the memory without eagerly loading the entire file, optimizing the process that brings significant TTI improvements as I/O operations on mobile device tend to increase the overall latency. No JIT. The majority of modern browser engine use just-in-time compilers. It means that the code is translated and executed line by line. However, the JIT compiler keeps track of home code segments, the ones that appear a few times, and hot code segments, the one that run many times. These frequent occurring code segments are then sent to a compiler that, depending on how many times they appear in the program, compiles them to the machine code and optionally performs some optimization. Hermes, unlike other engines, is an AOT ahead of time engine. It means that the entire bundle is compiled to bytecode ahead of time. As a result, certain optimization that JIT compilers would perform on hot code segments are not present. On the other hand, it makes the Hermes bundle underperform in benchmarks that are CPU oriented. However, these benchmarks are not really comparable to a real life mobile app experience where TTI and application size takes priority. On the other hand, JIT engine decreases the TTI as they need to pass the bundle and execute it in runtime. They also need to warm up, namely they have to run the code a couple of times to detect the common patterns and begin to optimize them. If you want to start using Hermes on Android, make sure you turn the enable Hermes flag in Android app build.gradle to true. For iOS, turn the Hermes engine flag to true in iOS pod file. In both cases, whenever you switch the Hermes flag, make sure you rebuild the project according to instruction provided in the native files. Once your project is rebuilt, you can enjoy a faster app boot time and likely smaller app size. A better startup time leads to a better performance. It's a never ending story. Make your application load fast is an ongoing effort, and its final result will depend on many factors. You can control some of them by taking both your application's configuration and the tools it uses to compile the source code. Turning Hermes on is one of the things that you can do today to drastically improve certain performance metrics of your apps, mainly the TTI. Apart from that, you can also look into other significant improvements shipped by the Meta team. To do so, get familiar with the write-up on React Native performance. It is often a game of gradual improvement that makes all difference when applied at once. The React Native core team has created a visual report on benchmarking between the stock React Native and the Hermes React Native. See here, as we mentioned in the section on running React Native, Hermes is one of the assets that you can leverage as long as you can stay up to date with your React Native version. Doing so will help your application stay on top of the performance game and let it run at a maximum speed. Optimize your Android application sizes with the Gradle settings. So yeah, we will check out this in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.